All right, greetings, barbecue family. Welcome to another live episode of the Backyard SmokeMaster Barbecue Podcast. I'm your host, Kenyatta Robinson. Thank you for tuning in. As always, I welcome those of you who are watching live. First of all, make sure you smash that like button. That helps us in the YouTube algorithm. And then also, please join in the comments. Your comments are the engine that drives the show. So today we're going to talk about why chicken is definitely one of the most cooked meats in barbecue, but then it's also one of the easiest to mess up, to get wrong, to make mistakes. You know, it doesn't seem like it's not talked about as one of the more complicated, challenging meats to do in barbecue. It's definitely not on the level of, let's say, tackling a brisket. It's something that we're all going to end up doing. It's not one that is often, it's not romanticized quite the way we talk about, for instance, doing our baby back ribs, for example. Chicken is just one of those staples, but it can be very tricky in terms of how to perfect it and how to get it right. So today I'm going to go over some tips and tricks that will help you hopefully become more consistent in making your barbecue chicken so that it turns out perfectly juicy, bite through skin, succulent every time. All right, but before we dive too far into this topic, as always, I love to give a shout out to the folks who are tuning in live. So let's do that. I always appreciate you guys. And my little comment thing is not bringing up the comment onto the screen. Oh my goodness. Okay, so all right, here's what we'll do instead. And this is what happens when you're running behind and trying to make sure that everything is ready to go for the podcast. All right, my comments are not coming up on the screen. I'm just gonna read them. All right, because I see them. I know you guys are there. So hello to Correctional Officer for Lockdown. He said, good evening, society family. Love the theme music. Mike is in the house, says howdy from Northern California. Let's see. All right. So we got comments from both of you guys, and anyone else who's tuning in, please jump in those comments. Say hi, say what's up. And then also, as we talk about this topic, feel free to ask questions, and it can be about the topic that we're going over this evening or anything else that's on your mind related to barbecue. Please go ahead, ask away. If I don't have the answer, then someone in the comments likely will have the answer. All right, let's get into this topic. Okay, so the challenges. First, let's talk about the challenges with regard to doing your barbecue chicken. So the first thing is you need to be aware. Be aware of, the nature of chicken. Thin cuts can dry out faster than brisket or ribs, right? So your chicken, your poultry is going to be typically, it's just considered a much more thin cut than, something hearty like brisket or ribs. And, the big thing that you need to take into consideration is that it can dry out faster. And then you also have to take into account that your cooking of the chicken, the rate in which it cooks, can be uneven due to dark meat versus white meat. And what do I mean by that? So white meat, we're talking about the breasts, the wings. These are going to be leaner, have less fat, less connective tissue, It dries out fast once it reaches 165 degrees internal. And your best bet with white meat is to pull it off of the grill when it's at around 160 to 165 internal. Dark meat, here we're talking about the thighs, the drumsticks. No, these cuts are going to be higher in fat and connective tissue content. They need more time and higher temperatures to fully render and get tender. And your dark meat is going to turn out best when it's around 175 to 185 internal. So right there, right off the bat, there's your first challenge. Dark meat, white meat, you know, they're going to cook at different paces. And then also the temperature at which you should be pulling them off of the grill differs between white and dark meat. And of course, what if you're doing a whole chicken? Right there, there's your big conflict and issue right there. But the main thing that we're trying to do when it comes to, you know, how do we determine what a good chicken is? Usually we're talking about, we want it to be juicy, but then we want that skin. I don't know if it's going to necessarily be crispy coming off of the grill or the smoker, but you know, we do want that skin to be what we often talk about as being bite through. We don't want it to be too chewy, too rubbery. So in order for your meat, your chicken to be juicy, that's going to require cooking at slower, lower temperatures. Whereas to get that bite through skin, temperatures then need to be higher, direct heat temperatures, in order to render the fat that's under the skin. And that's what's going to make that skin more bite through instead of rubbery. And I don't know about you guys, but that is kind of the worst. You know, at the end, you've done your chicken, it looks fantastic, and then you can't wait, you finally bite into it, and you find that skin, like all of the skin just comes off in that first bite. And then not only that, you're just chewing and chewing and chewing because the skin is rubbery. That has happened to me on many occasions until I started to really try and get in tune with, the science behind that and what are the techniques in order to avoid having the rubbery skin. Okay, let's see what you guys are saying in the comments. Hello to Marco. Again, sorry, you guys, my comments are not coming up on screen, so bear with me. I'm just going to read them out. But you guys, if you're watching on YouTube, you should be able to see each other's comments. Okay, Marco, thank you for tuning in. Marco says, hello. I agree. Chicken is overlooked. Brisket is known for its complexity, but chicken is just as difficult. Absolutely. I mean, it's not going to be as long of a cook as brisket, but there are going to be some complexities that you need to take into account during the cook when you're doing chicken. Okay, so let's get into how do you prepare yourself for success. So these are some things that you can consider doing to help make sure that your chicken turns out great. So brining is a great option, and there are two ways that you can brine. You can do a wet brine. The benefits of that is that that's going to help provide moisture retention and flavor, whereas the benefits if you do a dry brine, and that's just simply, you're applying your rub to the meat and letting it sit for a good amount of time. So that's going to be an easier process, and it tends to give you better skin texture. Another option, marinades. So marinades, think of it as when you do marinades, it's going to give you surface level flavor. It builds bold flavor on the outside, and we're talking about like on the skin. And it's really great, perfect when you want that first bite to really pop. Use a marinade. Seasoning your rubs. So rubs are going to layer flavors. You can layer your flavors, and obviously there's a whole lot of different combinations of spices that you can do. You could do, things that have salt, sugar, different herbs and spices. A tip that a lot of people, especially if you're going to make your own rub, usually everyone's going to start with salt. Remember though, you don't want to make it too salty. Take into consideration if you're adding some onion powder, garlic powder, take away some salt. Just adding in, equal parts salt, onion, garlic, onion powder, garlic powder. It's going to provide like a natural saltiness on its own. So if you're adding those types of spices, then you may not necessarily need to use quite as much salt. And I know that a lot of people overlook that. So I like to try and provide a reminder on that. Okay, and then another key consideration, again, if you've done a brine, if you've done a marinade, also allow that meat before you get it onto the smoker. Give it some time for the rub or the marinade to penetrate before you get to the cooking portion. Okay, so we're cooking, we're getting along. Let's get into next. We're going to talk about some cooking techniques, but actually, before we do that, let me just take a moment to let you guys know about something that I'm really excited about. So, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the BBQ radio network. Maybe you've heard it. It's basically the most popular, the biggest syndicated radio program in the U.S. related to barbecue. So it doesn't always come on at the same time, same place throughout the country. I think often it comes on, you can find it on the weekend. Well, your boy here was contacted by the Barbecue Radio Network, and I'm going to be a guest on the show. So I'm really excited about that. We will be recording my appearance on Tuesday. I'm not quite sure exactly when it will air, but I think it'll probably air on the following weekend. So if you guys are listening to the Barbecue Radio Network, check your local listings. Not this weekend, but I think next weekend is when I will be on the program. And then they also rebroadcast their episodes in the form of a podcast. So once I get more details about exactly when I will be appearing, I'll be sure to let you guys know. So I'm really, really excited and honored by this opportunity. And of course, I can't help but, ask myself, why in the world do they want to talk to me? I'm just a YouTube guy that's got a podcast that I'm trying to grow. But, I think it shows that there's traction, the building of the community that we have here in the podcast, you guys in the comments, as well as you guys that have joined the Backyard SmokeMaster Society, which I encourage you to do. You see it scrolling at the bottom. It's proof that we are building a barbecue community where we support each other, and you don't have to go through this barbecue journey alone. Go through it with amongst friends, like-minded individuals who love barbecue and want to help each other get better at barbecue, and that is my personal mission. So if you haven't already, please join the Backyard SmokeMaster Society at backyardsmokemaster.com/society. It's free. It'll only take you less than a minute to sign up and get in. So I hope you do that, and I look forward to seeing you all inside of the community. All right, let's get back into it. Cooking techniques. So these are some techniques that you can take on for your chicken to help ensure that it's gonna be juicy, perfect every time. And you don't have to follow these, suggestions. These are just suggestions. There's always a lot of different ways to make great barbecue, and I don't profess to be, the one that has all the answers, but I think these are some pretty good tips that you can take on that will help you improve and be more consistent at making great barbecue chicken. So start off by cooking your chicken indirect. Go indirect heat first. And what that basically means is simply keep the chicken away from the flames. Allow it to cook gently when you first put your chicken on the grill. And then at the finish, then go for the direct heat at the end. This will allow you to crisp up that skin, or to get that skin, to move it away from becoming the dreaded rubbery chicken. All right. So, but let's talk about skin on versus skinless. So, we go to Costco, we go to Sam's Club. Usually, like if you're buying, chicken thighs or maybe chicken breast, you'll see two options. You'll see it with the skin on. You'll see it sometimes with the skin off. Let me know in the comments, do you have a preference? First of all, I think there's probably this thought that, going skinless is going to be healthier, right? I think that that's probably the main reason why, you get that. And then also, you can do skinless, and that will, maybe that's something you can do with, other meals. Like maybe you're doing, let me see. Like if you're doing chicken, fajitas, you're going to want to use skinless. So there are lots of good reasons to go skinless. But I think in terms of the barbecue world, remember that skin on is going to help to protect your moisture. And here's a technique that I completely recommend. So instead of, if you do buy the whole chicken, please go ahead and spatchcock that chicken. And what that basically means is, you're taking out the backbone, you're taking out the spine, the backbone of the bird, and that will allow you then to, think of your bird as starting off kind of like if I can get my hands positioned right in the camera. You're starting off like this. When you spatchcock it, the bird is going to lay down more flat like that. And that's going to promote more even cooking. So I highly recommend that if you haven't done it before, there are a ton of videos out there where you can learn how to spatchcock a whole chicken. I mean, that will go a long way to helping you cook the chicken more evenly, across the entire surface. So that's a big recommendation that I highly recommend. And I'm just curious, like I said, I know everyone who is watching, I know you've all done chicken before, and you've probably tackled a whole chicken. Have you done spatchcock? Do you spatchcock your whole chickens? So I'm curious, let me know in the comments if you have done that before. And if not, is that something that you will learn how to do and take on in the future? Definitely want to know. So another big recommendation that I have for you in addition to spatchcocking your chicken, or even if you're just doing, a bunch of chicken thighs, bunch of chicken wings, drumsticks, you're doing a bunch of the individual pieces, get your target temperature of your grill, get it hotter. I know we're taught that, especially if we're talking about smoking a chicken, we're talking about trying to keep the temperature below 275 degrees. Ditch that way of thinking when it comes to chicken, because if you keep that bird at 275 or less throughout the entire cook, it is highly likely that your skin is going to end up rubbery. The flavor will be there. You'll get that smoke intensity that you're looking for, but it will be rubbery. So the skin. So pump up the temperature. Try and keep your temperature. My recommendation is to try and keep it between 300 and 350 degrees. Okay. Definitely do that. You'll thank me later, because that will go a long way to giving you better bite through chicken. And because, again, remember, the bird is not a thick cut of meat. It's not like brisket. It's not like ribs. So it doesn't require as much for that smoke flavor that you're looking for to penetrate the skin. If you're in the 300, 350 range, it will still take on some smoke flavor, even though conventional wisdom and what we're always taught is that smoking is considered to be generally, 275 or less. So definitely pump up the temperature. That's another recommendation. Take into consideration that, again, as we talked about earlier, the different segments, portions of the chicken is going to do better at different internal temperatures. You have to take this into account. The breast, you're looking for internal temperature between 160 and 165. Again, that's when you want to pull the breast. If we're talking about thighs, legs, or drumsticks, you're looking for 175 to 185 internal for tenderness. Okay. All right. Let's see. Next up. Talk about this often here on the podcast. Make sure everyone absolutely should have a reliable instant read meat thermometer in your toolkit and use it. Use it. Don't mess around trying to guess what the internal temperature of your chicken is. Don't mess around trying to figure out what the internal temperature of anything that you're cooking is. It's totally not necessary. You can get a good meat thermometer, very inexpensive. You can get them $15-20 easy. So everyone should have a reliable meat thermometer. All right, let me get into some comments. Again, I apologize for not being able to bring them up on the screen. Not sure what that's about today, but let's see. All right, correctional officer said, I'm always interested in trying to learn which wood gives me the best taste. That's always going to come down, to preference. And, chicken pretty much can work well with, both your fruit woods as well as, your nutty nut woods like hickory I mean, not hickory, but, like pecan, almond, hickory. I'm always a little leery about mesquite, but be careful with mesquite because to me, that's the strong one. Goes well with oak. And then the fruit woods, apple, cherry. I think you just have to try some different woods and see, which one is really giving you that smoke flavor that you want. I think, it really just comes down to preference on that. And then correctional officer said that he will definitely tune in. Again, I will let you guys know precisely when I will be on the Barbecue Radio Network, but it will be an upcoming episode where I will be a guest. So I appreciate you guys' support. You see. And Bruce also says, I want to explore jerk chicken cooking techniques, especially marinades. So, the best that I can offer on jerk chicken, what has worked well for me, there's a brand called Walker's Wood. I know that I always got it from Amazon. I think you can probably still get it on Amazon, but Walker's Wood, they make a really good marinade, jerk marinade, and I like the mild, the one that's considered mild. That one has always worked really well for me. It's really simple. Going off of memory, you use a little bit of you can use olive oil. I always try to use, I think it's coconut oil. But you can basically, use a good cooking oil. Vegetable oil works. Combine that with the marinade. The bottle gives you the ratios that you can use. And then, I basically put it into a Ziploc bag, add my wings, make sure then to, really massage the wings inside of the Ziploc bag. And then I leave it in there for at least 4 hours. Put them in the fridge. I like to do this the night before, so I like to let them sit overnight. Really excellent jerk chicken. And I know there's probably a lot of other ways and methods, so help Bruce out. If you guys have a favorite technique for your jerk chicken, put that in the comments as well. Smiley says, my wife gets juicy, crispy, evenly cooked chicken in an oven at 385 the whole cook. What is it about how grills cooks that makes it necessary to shift temps mid-cook to get similar results? Well, I think my answer to that, especially if you're cooking, even if you're cooking with a pellet grill, just remember that the heat inside of your grill, it's going to be constantly changing, right? I mean, the benefit of cooking it in an oven, you can set the temperature like your wife sets it at 385, and then, the electronics is going to do all the work of keeping the average temperature of your oven close to 385 degrees. Pellet grills work in the same way. I know that the temperature of a pellet grill, even if you set it, let's say at 385, or if you set it at 350, the pellet grill is not going to be exactly at 350 throughout the entire cook. It's gonna be more like some ups and downs throughout the cook, but the goal and what the pellet grill is really good at is making the average temperature average out at around 350. Now, if you're cooking with charcoal, or if you're cooking with a stick burner, that's a live fire, right? The coals are going to be in there burning. If you're cooking with wood splits, the splits are going to be burning. And the science is simply the temperature inside of your grill, your smoker, is going to change throughout the cook. So that's where the skill of the pitmaster comes into play, and making the necessary adjustments. If you're cooking with a kettle, a charcoal-based grill, you may have to mess around with the exhaust or the intake, allowing more air in, or limiting the amount of air that's getting into the firebox if you need to lower the temperature. Same thing on a stick burner. You're going to have to be adding splits And you may have to also, it's the same concept, you may have to make some changes to the amount of air coming into the firebox if necessary, to either increase the temperature or lower the temperature. So that's basically it. The temperature is not going to just be nice and steady, or close to that average temperature like it will inside of an oven. It's a living and breathing. It's like the live fire. It's living and breathing, and the temperature is constantly changing. That's where your skill comes into play, managing the temperature and trying to keep it pretty close to where you want it. Now, another tip though, don't obsess. Don't obsess about, trying to have your temperature exactly at 375. Be comfortable setting a good range. Like if I know that I want my grill to be at 350, I'm going to be okay if it's anywhere between, let's say, 325 and 375. I'm going to be comfortable knowing that more than likely, if I can keep it within that range, that it'll probably average out around the number that I want it to be. So hopefully that answers that question. Smiley. And then correctional officer asked, how long do you let your chicken rest? So we're going to get into that really quickly or shortly. We're going to get into the rest times for the chicken. And then correctional officer also said, for some reason, I think the PK grill is an awesome grill for chicken. I mean, I would argue that any grill in which you have learned how to master and control the temperature effectively can be awesome for chicken. Now, I know, correctional officer, that you have a drum. I think you have a drum smoker. And I think, me personally, I think drums are actually tailor built to produce great chicken, because drums generally like to be at hotter temperatures. It's a little bit easier to keep them pretty high. So again, if we're talking, 325, 350, 375, I think it's easier to consistently keep your temperature on a drum at that level. And then also with drums, your coals are going to be at the bottom of the drum. Your grills are on some grates directly above. There's going to be some good distance between, the grill grates and the coals. But then the drippings from the chicken fall back down into those coals, and then, they're gonna basically get regenerated into that smoke. And I think that just gives your chicken even more and better flavor. So, anything that you can control the temperature on, I think is going to work really, really well. Okay, so we talked about some cooking techniques. Now let's get into the finishing touches, the things that you can do to finish off your bird to help ensure that it is juicy and fantastic every time. So one option is to baste or mop the chicken, and you can use things like butter, vinegar, different sauces of your preference. The saucing strategy, let's talk about this. Should you glaze your bird at the end of the cook, or should you just serve sauce on the side? So what is your preference? I'm of the belief, at least my goal whatever I'm cooking, I'm of the belief, or what I'm trying to accomplish is I want to make sure that whatever I'm cooking, that it can stand on its own with or without sauce. So more often than not, I like to serve sauce on the side. However, there are some definite benefits, especially with things like chicken or ribs, to sauce them at the end to give them a certain flavor, certain look that you might be wanting to achieve. So definitely would like to know what your preference is. Noinks said that butter for the win, so he's a big fan of using butter. So yeah, get into the comments. Let me know how do you guys like to finish off your bird? And again, are you a fan of saucing or glazing at the end, or serving it after serving it on the side? We got into this. This was one of the main, I think, takeaways from last week's episode. If you didn't catch it, basically the whole episode was really about the importance of resting your meat at the end of the cook. No matter what you are cooking, it's an extremely important but often overlooked step, because you're in this big rush, after your meat has reached the desired internal temperature, to get it off the grill and get to slicing so you can, start eating it. That is a big, big mistake. So we will reiterate this point as we talk about how to successfully do chicken. Very important to allow the chicken to rest at the end of the cook. What it does is it allows the juices to and I struggled with this word last week, so I don't know why I put it back in this slide. Let the juices redistribute for maximum succulence. So if you're doing a whole chicken, and this answers correctional officer's question about rest times. If you're doing a whole chicken, let it rest for about 10 to 15 minutes. If you did bone-in chicken, so we're talking like thighs, thighs or wings or drums, allow it to rest 5 to 10 minutes. And if you did do boneless chicken, that only needs about 3 to 5 minutes rest time. So, but very important, this is not a step that you should be overlooking. So please, if you don't remember anything else, remember to allow your chicken to rest at the end of the cook. Again, quick shout out. Join the Backyard SmokeMaster Society if you haven't already. Would love to have you. Go to backyardsmokemaster.com/society. Okay, let's see. Noink said, I agree with you. The meat should stand on its own, but a nice glaze on some crispy skin is wonderful. Can't argue with that. Can't argue with that. And definitely, if that was your plan, then absolutely glaze that bird at the end, and it will give it a nice, good sheen, a great look at the end of the cook. All right, next. Can't get out of here without talking about some common mistakes that I want to make sure that you avoid. So overcooking the breast while you're waiting for the thighs to finish. So again, this is more about when you're cooking like a whole chicken, or even if you spatchcocked it. Remember again, desired internal temperature for the breast is going to be different from the thighs. The breast was 160 to 165. Thighs more like 170, 175 is the best temperature. So it's a balancing act. You want to get them both, in the desired internal temperature. But a big mistake that can be made is that your breast, while you're trying to get the thighs, up to 175 internal, then your breasts end up shooting over 165, and we've seen it, we've heard it before. The breast meat is usually, the white meat is usually the driest part of the chicken, and you definitely don't want to overshoot. So strategies that you can think about is you want to face or point the breast meat further away from your heat source than the thighs. So wherever your heat source is, wherever it's hottest inside of your grill, you want to try and have the breast not be directly exposed to the hottest part of your grill. I mean, that's really what you need to do to help ensure that you don't overshoot. Another mistake to avoid, okay, so if you are going to glaze, if you're going to sauce, don't do it too early, because most sauces, glazes, one of the ingredients is going to be some type of sugar, brown sugar usually. And what happens is often the sugar inside of the sauce can burn, and you don't want that to be, part of the end product on your bird. And this is a mistake that can be made from the outset. When you're getting that chicken out of the packaging, trim any excess, skin that you see, little hanging pieces of chicken that are just, hanging away from the rest of the meat. If there's some little clumps of fat, get rid of all of that. You don't want that to be part of the end result. So, just take a little bit of time to trim away excess skin and excess fat. And rushing the cook at high temperatures. So don't get impatient, or if you're thinking about, trying to make that skin, more bite through, just again, and this is where having a good internal thermometer comes into play. Be cognizant of where you are, what the temperatures are when you get ready to go to that direct heat portion of your cook, the high heat portion to crisp up the skin. Just don't overlook those things. Don't rush it, because that can be an easy way to mess up, your chicken at the very end. And we definitely want to avoid that. Okay. All right. So those are basically the main tips, suggestions that I have for you guys with regard to consistently doing great chicken. So remember, I think some of the main or the big takeaways that I would suggest: be cognizant that white meat is going to cook differently from your dark meat. So take that into consideration. And then also, we've said it over and over again, have a good instant read thermometer so that you're aware of your temperatures. At the beginning of the cook, start off gentle, indirect cooking at the beginning, and then wait till the end to expose the bird to direct heat cooking to help achieve better bite through skin so that it's not too rubbery. All right. Correctional officer said rotisserie cooking seems to be low maintenance compared to grilling. Yeah, and that's a good point. And it's another great way. Rotisserie cooking is a great way to ensure that you have a good cook on a whole chicken. And with doing it rotisserie, you don't necessarily have to worry about even doing the spatchcock. You can put the whole bird on the spit. It'll rotate, and it's a good way of making sure that, as the bird rotates on the spit, it's gonna naturally get more exposed to the direct heat or the hot coals at the bottom of your grill inside. So it's going to get that high heat, but it's not going to be exposed to the high heat for too long because it's constantly rotating in the rotisserie, and that helps promote good, even cooking as well. And I love my rotisserie for my Weber kettle. I don't use it often enough. I'm glad you mentioned it. Because again, that is a great way to do chicken, and it is indeed absolutely, it is low maintenance. All right, so well, I hope you guys got some good things to take away. Again, if you haven't already, please like this episode. Always appreciate you guys getting into the comments. And, you know, if you have buddies and friends out there who are trying to level up their barbecue, please tell them about us, tell them about the podcast, as well as the Backyard SmokeMaster Society. So I hope to see you all in the society very soon. So this is Kenyatta Robinson. Thanks again for tuning in to the Backyard SmokeMaster Barbecue podcast. Let me put up on the screen when we will be back on the next live show. Next Friday, same time, same place, 7 p.m. Pacific, 9 Central, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. All right, take care, guys. Get out there, enjoy your grills and smokers, cook something, and I will see you very, very soon. Take care. All right, so my comments, again, I can't show my comments like I usually do on the outro, so I'm just going to read them. Correctional officer said, like always, great show tonight. Noink said, excellent topic. And correctional officer said, everyone have a great weekend. And again, I'm going to go ahead and shout out everyone that added a comment. So thanks to correctional officer for lockdown, Noinks Barbecue. Let's see, we also heard from Smiley and Mike and Marco. Thanks to all of you guys, really appreciate you. Have a great weekend.